Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ruby on Rails 20 in 20 challenge. This is week 4, part 2. In part 1, uploaded yesterday, we created the basic API in Rails and we started getting some of that information through a XML HTTP request in a basic JavaScript HTML application. Today we're going to be extending that application a little bit by creating a form that allows you to make a post request to the Rails API. So you'll be able to enter a to-do list task in your application, like your HTML application, hit submit, and it'll submit it to the Rails database. You'll get a response, and then you'll have this new data added to your to-do list on your client side. So you're sort of continuing this idea of using the Rails application merely as a backend API and having a completely separate entity that operates as the front end, or uses your service or something. If you do find these videos helpful, remember to like them. If they're not helpful, remember to dislike them so we don't subject other people to them. And subscribe and all that other good stuff. And I will see you guys in the code right now. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about real quick is if we come into our config and our application.rb, I just want to say thank you to Lucky7 from the previous episode's comments, and I'll have something on the screen right now, for pointing out that we don't actually need this middleware config in our application.rb, so we can just get rid of this. And the reason we don't need it is because inside of our config initializers folder, there is actually a cores.rb file. And in here, you can see that they already had a template set up. It just wasn't mentioned in the GitHub repo. So if we just go ahead and uncomment this, you can, we'll change this from example.com to an asterisk. And then I'll just save this, and the project should work basically the same way it did before. If I paste this in, you can see what it looked like before compared to what it looks like in here. So really, the only difference is that your headers are right here, and the methods, if I just backspace these over, and then I backspace this, it looks basically the same. It's just set up with a full call to Rails application instead of this config variable. But we'll just get rid of these changes and save it like this. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. So let me just go ahead and restart the server. And I'm running it with Rails S-P 3001 to have it serve off of the localhost port 3001. So if I come here, you'll see the Ruby on Rails thing. And if I go to /todos, you'll see our API is serving us all of our to-do items. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's come over to our previous JavaScript HTML project thing that we were working with. And let me come over to the application.js. So what I'd like to do today is create some sort of form that we can submit tasks to the database with. So what I'm thinking we'll do is if we come into, so in here we'll need some kind of function that's like, what should we call this? We could do something like send form. Oops, so we'll say like function send form, right? And this will have some brackets or whatever, and then that's the end of that function call. So inside of our index, we'll need to actually create the form in our HTML. So if we come into our body, let's go below the home but above the container, and let's just say form, and we're going to need to give this a couple things. It's going to need an accept char set, which is equal to UTF-8. We need an action, and for this, it's just going to be your, the web page you visit to do this. So because it's the create action, it's going to be localhost port 3001 /todos, because when you go there, it'll automatically handle the posting. And then we also need a method, which is equal to post, P-O-S-T. And we also need to give this an ID equal to the to-do form. So that is that. We can then enter down and add in 2 extra fields right here. So the first thing we need is an input. So I'll just type input. The type is going to be text, and the name is going to be to-do task. Because inside of our Rails application, if you were to look at an actual form when it's created, this is sort of the format that they use for the names. So this will pass in the task as a to-do parameter. So inside of your controller, you can do something like params to-do and then task or something like that. But once that's done, the other thing we need is a value, which by default you can set to like the empty string. Let's just give this a value of like example. And that's it for this input. So let's add in a slash to close this off. And then let's do one more input with a type equal to submit, a value equal to submit, and then onClick equal to, well, actually, let's leave the onClick off for now. So we'll just close this off, hit save, and my formatter will automatically format these things. So let's come over to, well, I guess I have to actually open this. So I'm just going to right click and open in the default browser, which I have in VS Code because of an extension called Open in Browser, appropriately named. If you don't have that, you can, of course, just drag this into your window. So if I like open up a new tab here, you could also just do, oops, not from there. Let me open this up in my File Explorer. So reveal in File Explorer. So if you open up a window like this and you navigate to your index, you should just be able to drag it over to your browser or just open it with whatever you would like to. So like in this case, it'd be Chrome. But you know, any of those options are going to work for you. So if we come over to our index and I actually open it, we now have this form here, which has example in it. But if I hit submit, it's going to submit to the To-Dos API. And now if you look at the URL, we like completely changed our location. So instead of being in our default app right here, and if I refresh, you can see that example is down here as number 13. So we can say like this is the 14th to-do item. And if I hit submit, we're going to go from d/site/API task user/index.html into our Rails application. And we really don't want it to work like that. So what we can do, if I come back here and I remove this, so what we're going to do is we'll add in an onClick. We'll set this equal to window.sendForm event. And we'll save that. So now we can come over to, let me just close this extension. We can come over to our application.js, and I'll close this index.html for now. And we can flesh out this sendForm function. So what we have now is we have a window call. So let's say window.sendForm is equal to a function which takes in an event. And again, we're not doing this in the most optimal way. We're just doing this as sort of an educational exercise. Of course, if you wanted to, you could do this in a myriad of other ways. I just prefer to, sort of do things in a way that makes it clearer what's happening. So let me actually get rid of this event.prevent default. So when you have a window.whatever variable, as we've covered before, that allows you to, even in your console, you can say like window, or you can say send form and access that function from in here. So if I were to just change this and say alert, I sent the thing, and save this, if I refresh the page and I call send form, and I hit enter, you'll see that the alert is running. So that's sort of what's happening here. And because the event is going to have a default like go to the thing call, to prevent ourselves from being sent to whatever page, we're just going to add in a prevent default. So if I hit submit, we're no longer going to the page. And if I get rid of this and I call this, it's still taking us to the page. So that's sort of why we're doing that. So we're going to leave in the prevent default here. We're now going to create another XML HTTP request. So we'll say var XHR, or you could even call it XHTTP, is equal to a new XML HTTP request. And then we'll close that off. So here we're going to say x http.open because we need to open a post. So we're going to say open post in quotes, comma. Then we're going to say http://localhost port 3000 / to-dos, which is the address that we're trying to go to here. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to say comma true because this takes in an async argument that is a Boolean, and we're trying to do this asynchronously. So once we have that, we now have our open. The next thing we need to do, and if I full screen this, it might be easier to see, is say http://onload is equal to a function that takes in an event. And inside of this, we're going to once again say let the container equal the document.container. So similar to what we have up here. So this is document.getElement by ID of the container. And then we also need one for the response, not responses, because we only have one response this time. For this, we're going to say json.parse event.target. We're going to say event.target.response. So that gives us our response. The final thing we have to do now is say container.insert a JSON HTML. Insert a JSON HTML. And for this, we'll do another after begin, comma, and then we'll throw in this exact same thing that we had up here with the square brackets. So we'll use the same format. Obviously, you wouldn't want to be reusing code this much. In a real environment, you would want to do something like, oh, I forgot to call that. This should be response spelled correctly. So now I should be able to say response.id plus the square bracket. In a real environment, you wouldn't want to be reusing code. You want to follow, dry principles, so don't repeat yourself. And I apologize if you can hear what sounds like a sea lion in the background. That is one of my dogs, apparently very excited about a neighbor's dog. So we'll say response.task, and then we'll throw in the BR tag again. And then we'll close this off. So now we have the container insert added here. And the final thing we need to do now, after we come out of this, is say var form data is equal to new form data. This is going to be document.getElement by ID. And for this one, this is why we named, if I come over to the index, that's why we named the form, or we gave the form an ID of to-do form, because we're actually going to be using that over here. So we're grabbing the to-do form, and we're storing the form data. And then we're going to do a xhttp.send, and we're going to send the form data. And if we did all of that correctly, in theory, I should be able to come over here, refresh the page, and we have 15 here, apparently. I must have accidentally sent one. So let me create a 16th to do. So number 16 is create the form video. And now if I hit submit, it is appended to the first element here because I used after begin instead of before end. But of course you can leave this as a after begin, and you can set these to be after begin. So now if I do this is a 17th, it gets added appropriately. And if you wanted to, what you could even do is up here just say something like var element addition position is equal to after begin. And then you can just grab this element position, whatever variable, and replace both of these. So now if we refresh the page, we can say like number 18 gets added to the 18th. And then let's change this to a before begin. Refresh the page. Now it's the opposite. So number 19 should be at the end. And there you go. So it's just a quick way to configure this in a bit of a cleaner way. You could also do something similar with your responses here. You could refactor this out and say something like a function that takes in your response and it grabs these things. So let's maybe try to do that real quick. So let me full screen this again. So let's come down here and let's create a function called, we'll say a function for to create a response, and this will take in a response. And in here we'll return a string of square bracket plus the response.id plus square bracket colon space quote plus response.task plus a br tag. So if we did that correctly, we should now be able to come in here and say for this one, create response. Oops, don't need that semicolon there. And we should also be able to come up here and do something similar. And if we refresh the page, everything's broken. Oops. Create response. This should be responses I. And now everything seems to be working again. So let's just zoom in real quick and let's try to create a final 20th element. And there you go, it's added appropriately. And now we are using a bit more of a dry approach to this, which is, of course, always something that you want to see. But I think that's going to do it for this shorter episode. I hope this helps, and I will see you guys in the outro. Okay, so that's going to do it for part 2 of this week's 20 and 20 challenge. Hopefully part 3 will just be some quick styling changes as we do a little bit of cleanup for making this application a little bit more presentable. It's a bit of a shorter project this week, but hopefully this is good prep work for using different frameworks like React or Vue in the future to create some more interesting applications, and hopefully it teaches you guys a little bit about using APIs from like a Rails perspective as well as from the consumer perspective. Because it's always important to remember that just because you created something doesn't mean that it's necessarily usable from the user's perspective. And I feel like using a project like this gives you both the perspectives from the producer and the consumer point of view. So if this video was helpful, remember to like it and, subscribe for more. And that pretty much does it for me. I will see you guys in part 3. Thank you for watching.